Alright guys, I'm just gonna take you through a simple photo editing thing from my phone, just to show you how easy it is. Oh, my cats are going crazy. Um, so, that's something to take a picture of here. So as you can see, I have these thirds lines on the grid. I can turn that off here, or push it on, or do golden ratio. Usually I'll do thirds. It's a basic photographing thing. You just want to line up your subject on the lines. Basically, it's as simple as that. So I'm going to fit mine into the middle, just arbitrarily. I think it looks good. Take the picture. Once it finishes processing, I'll hit the edit button, and I'm using Snapseed to edit all of this. Let me move this. Oh, I can't see that thing out of the way. Okay. So my basic process tends to be almost the same every time. I can go into tune details first. It looks a bit bright, so I'll drop it down, and it tends to be a lot of guesswork. I'm actually going to leave the contrast because I'm going to mess with it later. A little bit less. Okay. So that's just kind of like a very, very basic, just to get the colors looking a bit better. And almost always it'll need a bit of sharpening, and that's in the details section. So I up the sharpening and the structure, and the structure kind of adds a bit of crunch to it, if that makes sense. It kind of makes the textures look a bit sharper, as opposed to sharpness, which sharpens the edges more. So it's nice that those are separated, and it gives you a bit more control. So after that, I'll tend to go down here into the filters, unless there's anything that's desperately needed up here. And there's stuff like curves, which is really nice if you're, you want to really get into the mess of it and just really adjust the shadows and the highlights, which you don't really need to do. That actually goes kind of nice, so I'll just leave that. And it's nice with the Snapseed because you can, where is it? Layers? Oh, view edits. It's kind of weird because I'm doing it in landscape. So I can actually come in and edit each individual thing that I've done. And so I'm going to actually turn off, put the brightness back to how it was, and the shadows back to how it was. And you can leave that, but I'm just doing it because I actually edited the curves here. I'll probably keep doing that a bit more. So basically I got the exact same effect there. I lowered the shadows and lowered the brightness overall. But you don't need to do that at all. I'm just showing you that if you wanted to, you could get into the really deep customization. Here's white balance stuff. Again, don't need to do that. This looks like it's just going to make it look worse, so I'm just going to leave it. So the next step that I usually do after sharpening and basic tuning is to go into the tonal contrast, and a lot of times the defaults here are okay. Sometimes I want to add protect shadows, but what this does is it adds contrast in just the bright areas, just the middle areas, and just the dark areas, which sounds like more contrast everywhere, which it does, but if you wanted to just focus on one, you can. I'm actually going to turn most of these down because there's actually quite a lot of contrast already. Cats are attacking each other. So looking at this, there's a lot of different filters, and a lot of these tends to be more Instagram-y, not as much just for uploading. And you can add Instagram filters on top of this if you avoid these. If you do vintage, then immediately you see you kind of get those sort of filters, or even if you do, was it Retrolux, you get even more vintagey sort of stuff. But I'm not going to do any of that. I usually don't. So the next thing that I do is lens blur. And so here you can see there's a focal point and everything else gets blurry outside of that. So this inner ring is the sharp part. The outer ring is where it starts to get, where the full blurred effect starts. And the distance between these two here is the transition. And so you can actually take the transition here and make it a bigger transition if you want, or make it smaller. So here you can see there's like almost no transition, and you can basically see the circle. So I tend to take the transition all the way out, and then you can up the blur strength so it's even blurrier on the outside. And this is what kind of makes it look like a DSLR, because you get that that depth of field look is what it's called, and you get the bokeh in the background. The bokeh is like the blurry bits that are made from the lensing, and we're just kind of faking that here. So one thing that I almost always do is take it off of this circle mode, right? And so here we've got the horizontal. If I click it, you can see it. Yeah, so here's the horizontal. And this is much more like like actual photography, because it's about the distance from the camera. Stuff in the back will look blurrier, stuff in the front will look sharper. If you have a circle, why is stuff on the sides blurry, you know? And you can use that. Sometimes I'll do this and just make it really wide, but still keep some stuff blurring. Kind of like that. And so I just kind of go along, try and figure out what's far from the camera and what's close. So you can kind of like adjust it. And so now it's really, really blurry. You can really step this up. And that's obviously, that's way too much. And so I might turn down the blur strength to kind of make it less obvious. Stretch this out a bit. Just a bit, because I want some of the mouse to get blurry. And that's really what people consider to be the biggest, oh my gosh, wow factor. Another thing that's almost necessary is vignetting. So right now, you look at the edges and it's all bright. It's just almost flat. When you take a picture with a DSLR camera, the lens adds a bit of vignetting, which just adds a bit of darkness to the edge. So I turn it all the way up. You can see the edges are much darker than way back here, but the center is about the same. I like to have quite a bit of vignetting. It kind of masks the lens blur effect with the blurriness. It just looks much more natural. So there you go. Looks pretty good. And then after that, if you wanted to, you can add other things. I might do a vintage. Sure. What does this do? No idea. Oh. So that one actually added more vignette. I don't want that because I already added vignette. So I'm going to go back into it, into the vintage, click on the settings, and go down to vignette strength. Turn that back down. And you can increase the style strength and stuff like that to make it more or less. So yeah, so basically just mess with it and learn as much as you can about it, but that's my general process. So initially just tune it a little bit, then sharpen it just a little bit. Again, everything is about moderation here, because if you keep adding stuff and adding stuff and adding stuff, you get really bad looking photos. So the curves I added in just because I could have done it in the tune image like I showed you before. Tonal contrast, you can probably see the, like, especially on the top of the mouse, the added contrast. Then I threw on the lens blur, which really makes it pop, and then why not throw on a vintage filter. So once you've done that, where is it? There's a done button somewhere usually. Oh, top left. So So then it goes in and renders all of that stuff in really high detail. You see the lens blur takes a while. So what it was showing you before was just a preview on your phone, but it actually sends the photo to Google, and then it runs all the really high definition stuff on their servers, and then sends the image back to you, which is pretty cool. So let me... all photos. Come on. So there you go. That's the final image. Yeah, so I'll probably tweet this along with the video, and give me any feedback. Thanks.